Hello and welcome to another episode of Snakes Territory. I am Jesse Friedman alongside Jack Sommers. And Jack, over the weekend, there was some hope for Diamondbacks fans. They swept the Cardinals. They outscored them 22-7. It felt like they made a statement. And then over the past 3 days against the Houston Astros, all of that good work was undone essentially as the Diamondbacks got swept. And Jack, these were some pretty frustrating games to watch, I think, for D-backs fans.
Yeah, there was a lot of anger and frustration out there on the part of many fans and pundits alike. It was not a fun series to watch and to cover and to interact over, but that's the nature of the beast, right? That's baseball. It's a 162 game season, and 29 teams go home empty-handed when it comes to chasing a championship, the ultimate goal. For the Diamondbacks, everyone was hopeful that this was going to be a really good season. And now, as we head into the trade deadline, um, this sweep has really kind of cemented their direction.
We're going to get into that a whole lot more later in the show, talk about even some potential names that the Diamondbacks could target as they pivot to probably selling, maybe targeting some young pitching that could help them in future seasons. One of the thoughts that went through my mind throughout this series against the Astros, Jack, was that this is what it looks like to have starting pitching depth. The Astros, I think you could argue, are one of few teams that might even have it worse than the Diamondbacks from an injury standpoint. I mean, in this series, they were without Jeremy Pena, they were without Yordan Alvarez. There are whole other names, Isaac Paredes, right? The list goes on. And on the pitching side, I mean, Christian Javier, I believe, had Tommy John surgery. Luis Garcia, the list just Renel Blanco, who was very good for them last year. The Astros are in a pretty similar position to the Diamondbacks from an injury standpoint, and yet you've got this lefty named Colton Gordon going out there on Monday, and is he dominant? No, but he has a 4.53 ERA in 12 games this year. Like, that's really valuable. And then on Wednesday, you get a lefty in Brandon Walter, who, I mean, I don't know where he would fall or where he would have fallen on the Astros pitching depth chart back in March or April, but this guy has 52 strikeouts to 4 walks this season. I mean, these numbers are really impressive, and the Astros have lost really just as much as the Diamondbacks have from a pitching standpoint.
Yes and no. I mean, I think that the second tier of the Diamondbacks pitching depth was also wiped out by injury.
That's fair.
Christian Mena going down, Montez Dioca, Dre Jameson, Kyle Ament. So a lot of guys that they were counting on to step in, both in the rotation and the bullpen, if there were injuries, also went down. And so you got into the third tier. So I think the combination of the Astros having a deeper system when it comes to pitching in the first place, and maybe their second line wasn't quite as injured as the Diamondbacks was when it comes to the pitching side of things. Their position player injuries, several of those happened more recently. And actually, the Astros came into the series 2-7 in their last 9. So it wasn't like they lit the world on fire. And they actually only scored 13 runs in this series. It's not like they came in and blew the doors off Diamondbacks pitching, with the exception of Brice Matthews and his 2 home runs off of Zach Gallen for 5 RBIs. But other than that, how was the play, Mrs. Lincoln? Other than that, it's not like the Astros. I mean, they, outside of Brice Matthews in game 1, they scored one more run in that game, and then 7 more runs in the following 2. So it wasn't that their position players absolutely crushed it and filled in phenomenal. It's just that their pitching is deeper, and their second line pitching is not as injured as the Diamondbacks' second line.
I mean, there were more names. I think you're probably right. But Hayden Wesneski also out with Tommy John surgery. I mentioned Christian Javier. JP France is another name. I think there Lance McCullers is another one. He's also on the injured list. I think we're in like at least somewhat similar territory. You're probably right. Maybe the D-backs have had a little worse. Corbin Burns certainly, you expect him to be as good a starter as anyone. Whereas on the Astros side, Framber Valdez, fortunately for them, is still healthy and pitched very, very well in the series. But yeah, I guess Brice Matthews, Jack, kind of became the story of the series. We already talked about what he did against Zach Gallen in the game on Monday, but he came back and hit another big home run on Tuesday. A lot of people coming into the series were probably had no idea who Brice Matthews was. And you see, it was like 1 for 12 with 6 strikeouts or something to start his big league career. But at the same time, Brice Matthews is a top 100 prospect. He's the top prospect in the Astros system. So this isn't, a total nobody, quote unquote, by baseball standards. This is a well-respected player around the league, but nonetheless, you'd hope for the Diamondbacks to contain him a little bit better than they did.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, he's a good hitting prospect. He's got power. He showed power in the minor leagues. It's not like this came out of nowhere. The biggest issue with Brice Matthews is his, carries a 30% strikeout rate coming
Right.
out of the minor leagues. So you would have hoped that you would be able to get a little bit more swing and miss. But every mistake, and even like the home run that he hit on game 2. That ball was kind of down. It was a little over the middle. It was a slider that hung up a little bit, but he had to go down and get it. It wasn't like it was smack dab in the middle of the zone either. So, I
Yeah.
mean, he showed that he's got, some plate coverage as well.
Looking at some takeaways from the series at large, Jack, the Diamondbacks really struggled to hit with runners in scoring position. They did go 3 for 7 in the game on Wednesday, but that didn't really wind up leading to many runs for them, of course. So 6 for 26 in the series as a whole. Eduardo Rodriguez, on a positive note, Jack, was really good for them in that Tuesday game. I mean, you looked on paper at Eduardo Rodriguez against Framber Valdez. Maybe you didn't feel great about the Diamondbacks' chances, but to his credit, he pitched really well. The velocity was up a little bit. I think with Erod, you kind of have to see more. He has had a few good outings this year. It's not like there haven't been any, but maybe this could be the start of something for Eduardo kind of turning his season around.
Yeah, he hadn't pitched in 12 days. Like he hadn't pitched in a long time. And, it seems like when he gets lots of time off, his stuff ticks up and he does better.
Yeah.
Maybe he's a prime candidate to pitch every 6th day. I don't know. He's had 2 shoulder injuries, right? And he's in his 30s. And he does better when he has lots of extra rest. So I think there's a lot of little clues here for where we are with Eduardo Rodriguez. It was a very great outing. He said it was as good as he ever felt this year, and obviously so. I mean, like you said, I think there were some 5s and even 6s in there on his
Yeah.
velocity. He painted he didn't leave any balls in the middle of the plate. This is as good as it gets with him. And hat tip to him. My only caveat there is, how much rest can he do that on 4 days rest?
Right. Yeah, that is a big question for sure. Brandon Pfaadt continued his positive momentum, 5 1/3 innings, 2 runs in the game on Wednesday. His outing was cut a little bit short as he ran into some trouble. The defense didn't really do him any favors either in the 6th inning of that game, but he pitched pretty well. Diamondbacks bullpen, Jack. I know this was one of your takeaways in the story that you wrote after this series. That it's not a shock to anyone. It's not exactly news, but when Jake Woodford is coming in the 8th inning in a close game, when you're relying on these guys who were pitching in AAA just a few weeks ago, and now they're in high leverage situations for you, that's not a position that any team wants to be in.
Yeah, I mean, we know the situation. None of the relievers on this team currently were on the opening day roster, right? Kevin Ginkel should have been when he was injured. The other 7 guys, none of them were on the team. Most of them weren't even in the organization. This is a collection of journeymen and castoffs that Torey Lovullo has to turn to. And all the second guessing about who he should have used, who he shouldn't have used. It's tired. It's old. It's a worn argument and debate. Mike Hazen says it's a nonsense debate. So forget about Jack Sommers saying it's a nonsense debate. The general manager of the team says, hey, get off Torey's case. It has nothing to do with it. He doesn't have the horses. And it's clear and obvious. I mean, look, even Kevin Ginkel, I mean, he gave up the winning run in the third game of the series. There were 2 bunt base hits. The defense kind of betrayed him. Josh Naylor not stretching out to get that ball, but then he
Yeah.
threw nothing but fastballs to Christian Walker and gave up a base hit up the middle. So I mean, there is no shutdown reliever on this team. Not one, not a single one that Torey Lovullo can turn to and say, "Hey, that's the guy that I can turn to at least to get me out of a tight spot." Who is it? There isn't one. Maybe Shelby Miller can be that when he comes back, which is probably pretty soon. He's going to throw another bullpen or live BP on Friday. And then if everything goes well from there, I would guess he's going to rejoin the team. If not by Sunday in Pittsburgh, then the following Monday, he should be back with the team, maybe by Detroit. That's kind of what it's looking like, unless he needs one more outing after that. Shelby Miller may also, if they want to trade him, they probably need to showcase him a little bit. But I mean, that's the closest thing is an injured Shelby Miller coming off the IL might be the only possible potential shutdown reliever that Torey Lovullo has to turn to. That's it.
It's not great. It's not great. Another topic that came up in the series, and it has been something that has come up before, is that the Diamondbacks have a new third base coach this year in Shaun Larkin, and at times he has not looked super confident making decisions with guys rounding third base. And I guess in his defense, I would be completely mortified to have the job that he does. It seems like it would be very stressful and difficult, and I can't imagine what that's actually like on the field. But obviously, it's an important job, Jack, and there have been a few moments this year where it's felt like he's maybe made the wrong decision, and there were a couple of those in the series. On Wednesday, there was an incident on Tuesday in the ninth inning, and then on Wednesday, there was a moment where Corbin Carroll hit an extra base hit down the right field line, and it appeared that Ketel Marte could have scored from first, but Larkin held up Marte at third, which then forced Carroll to stay at second, even though he might have been able to get to third. And if you play that inning out, theoretically, the Diamondbacks come away with another run there. And the Diamondbacks only lost the game by 1 run.
Right. And if he sends Naylor and he sends Ketel and they both get thrown out and Ketel gets hurt at home, he's going to get roasted as well. Look,
Yeah.
I went back and looked at the videos myself. I went back and watched Mark Grace's breakdown, which, was the most prominent presentation of what happened. And clearly, Shaun Larkin was a little confused in that situation. Stop, go, stop. So that looked really bad. But there was another element to this. Yes, the throw came into third base, and you say they were conceding the run. But Naylor was about 2/3 of the way to third base, maybe 3/4 when he looked up, saw the stop sign, and pulled up. Okay. And then a beat or two later, the throw comes into third base. Naylor's really slow. Third baseman, yes, he caught that ball well behind the third base bag. Guess what? If Naylor runs, he probably turns around, throws to home, and guns him down at home plate. I think there's better than 50% chance that Naylor's out at home, even if he never got a stop sign and kept running. The ball is thrown into third base, and third baseman turn around, throw home, and still get him. I think that's what could have easily happened. Instead you had bases loaded, nobody out, and you didn't produce. So I mean,
Yeah.
That's point one. And then on the Ketel thing, I actually think Ketel could have scored pretty easily. He was just rounding third base before the cutoff man even had the ball in his glove. I think that he could have and should have scored in that situation. Torey Lovullo's answer there was, there are certain guys on a no-go list, whether it's because of their speed or because they're trying to protect him. Obviously, in Ketel Marte's case, they're trying to protect him, and Torey just said outright he's on that list of no-go guys. So, maybe that's just Torey defending his third base coach, but that's what he told us.
Well, we have more to get to on this series, and perhaps more importantly, a bigger conversation to have about where the Diamondbacks stand heading into the trade deadline. It is now just a week away as we record this, and there's a whole lot of interest in several of their players, but it's still a little bit unclear who is going to go and who could stay. We'll get into all of that on the other side of this break.
Time for a quickie break. Todd Father and I are going to tell you about Huel, but it's mostly going to be Todd Father because I'm going to take a sip.
Well, we're talking about Huel, 27 vitamins and minerals. It's a complete meal. Let's listen. We all have busy schedules. As Scott's sipping it down, it looks delicious. It tastes delicious. When we're on the run, we need something to eat quick. And guess what? Huel is there, all different flavors. Scotty loves them. I love them. And I love how variety packed it is. And we can eat them any time of the day.
That's right. Yeah, check out the website. There's bars. There are so many different flavors. I love the black edition. Chocolate, 35 grams of protein. There's strawberry shortcake, coffee caramel, cookies and cream. I can go on. And you get yourself 15% off if you're a new customer using the code FOUL at Huel.com/foul. Please see our description for the terms and conditions. Skip the stress, not the nutrition. Try Huel today for complete nutrition with the code FOUL at Huel.com/foul.
Well, Jack, we've been talking for a while now about how the Diamondbacks might approach the trade deadline, and it kind of felt like they were still in sell mode going into the Astros series. Certainly after the Astros series, it really feels like they're in sell mode. And yet we have a story from Ken Rosenthal that came out this morning where he said that some rival executives are not convinced that the Diamondbacks will actually be aggressive sellers. Rosenthal talked about how Ken Kendrick is certainly nearing the end of his career as the Diamondbacks owner and being very, very involved with this stuff. And he's talked about how he wants to build a winner. He wants to try to have as much success as he can while he's still in this position. And so apparently, Jack, it doesn't seem, it maybe feels like it to us, but it doesn't seem like a foregone conclusion that the Diamondbacks are going to sell aggressively in the way that I think a lot of people would expect.
My thought process, before reading and hearing that, was that the Diamondbacks need to really hold the line on what their expectations are as far as the return. You don't just trade to trade. And a bunch of A-ball prospects that who knows what you're going to get with lottery tickets.
Yeah.
They have a specific goal. They want major league ready pitching, and if you can't get the targets that you want, and we're going to go through some names that may or may not be their targets, but just to go over the types of pitchers. The main point, though, is, hey, if you're going to trade Eugenio Suarez, if you're going to trade Merrill Kelly, if you're going to trade Zach Gallen, you better get the return that you really are seeking. Don't settle. And so if Ken's accurate in his depiction of where they're at, then to me that's good, because I would rather see them hold on and get the compensation draft picks than settle for somebody that is of a lesser value. Patrick Forbes, who was a compensation pick at number 29, thanks to the Christian Walker signing with the Astros. He's slotted into, I think, number 13 on Baseball America's, top 30 list. I don't know where Pipeline's going to put him, but the point being is that those picks are really valuable. I mean, maybe not a top 10 guy, but certainly, in your top 15. That number 29, 30, 31, 32 pick should be a guy that you can slot within your top 15, maybe even your top 10. So if you're not doing better than that, hold.
And it feels like, just from a market standpoint, in particular with Eugenio Suarez, the Diamondbacks are in a very good position. Before we hopped on the air, we were going through a list of teams that could be interested in Geno Suarez. And that list is pretty long, Jack. I mean, the Brewers, the Tigers, the Cubs, the Yankees, the Mariners. There was a story about the Reds being interested. Of course, Geno spent a long time in Cincinnati in the past. The Texas Rangers are back in the mix, and they have third base problems. The Diamondbacks appear to be in a very good position where they have a guy who's on pace at 55 home runs, and he plays the position that a lot of teams around the league need. And so maybe in past years, Jack, pitching felt like the ultimate premium, like that's what every contender wants the most. But this year, it feels like third base, if you have a really, really good hitting third baseman, as the Diamondbacks do, you feel like you kind of hold all the cards at that point.
Yeah, it is an unusual dynamic. I mean, almost certainly pitching is going to get you a bigger return than hitting at the trade deadline. That's the old axiom, and it's almost always true. But this may be a case where it is different because of what you just said. The number of teams that actually happen to not only need some more offense, but specifically at third base is unusually large. At the same time, I kind of tweeted out early this morning or late last night, a little cautionary note. Back in 2021, Kyle Schwarber, was on a heater. He'd hit 25 home runs in 72 games. He's equal power threat, and he was only 28 years old at the time. And all he got was the Red Sox number 19 pitching prospect, a fellow named Aldo Ramirez, who's never made it to the show. And is pitching in Mexico now. Now that doesn't mean that the Diamondbacks can't get a good return for Gino, but my point is that, it's not easy. Teams at the end of the day are really reluctant to give up, a top 5 guy or a top 6 guy or a top 10 guy even for somebody that they're only going to have for 2+ months. And it's really hard to get it.
And you and I have certainly taken some criticism from the Twitterverse and our lovely people here on YouTube for maybe downplaying what the Diamondbacks get in return for someone like Gino Suarez. And I want to add to that, when we talk about how you're not going to get something super crazy, what we mean is that even a top 100 prospect, which the Diamondbacks, I think, have a legitimate chance to get for someone like Gino Suarez, given this market that we're describing. But even top 100 prospects, Jack, I mean, you and I have been following baseball for a long time. You certainly a little bit longer than I have. Top 100 prospects are not a sure thing by any means. A decent number of them never really turn into much of anything. And it's not to say that a top 100 prospect is not a good return for Gino Suarez. I think it'd be a great return for Gino Suarez. But we just kind of want to add to that, those guys are not necessarily slotting into the top of your rotation in a year. Maybe they will, but there's a decent chance that they will not. And that leads us into a conversation, Jack, about, as we can see here, as we show here on the screen, some of the names that the Diamondbacks could actually realistically try to get for someone like Gino Suarez, or maybe some of these names could be in play for a Merrill Kelly or a Zach Gallen, or maybe some sort of a combo deal involving Josh Naylor as well. There's some overlap between the teams that need third base help and some teams that need pitching help. It's hard to know, Jack, where admittedly there's some speculation involved here, but all the names we're going to talk about have at least been mentioned in some form or fashion by someone who is plugged in on some level. So I guess we'll start with the Cincinnati Reds, who are a team that is interested in Gino Suarez, according to Trent Rosecrans over at The Athletic. And he mentioned Chase Petty, a right-handed pitching prospect who I believe is at the very back end of MLB Pipeline's top 100. I think he's number 99 on that list. And he potentially, Jack, could be an option here, according to Rosecrans reporting.
Yeah, I mean, he's a 22-year-old right-hander. He's got a fastball, a slider, a change. He throws pretty hard, 96.5 miles an hour average on his fastball. Doesn't actually strike out that many batters for whatever reason, and walks a few too many. That's where we're at with a guy like that, where he's still trying to find himself and trying to find a little bit more swing and miss with the secondaries and find the plate a little bit more. One thing I wanted to mention, when I look at these guys, I use Fangraphs has a metric called ERA minus and FIP minus, and it's similar to ERA plus. It just kind of moves in the other direction. So 100 equals the league average, and so lower is better.
Yeah.
And so it's very easy, quick, and dirty. And the reason we want to reference these is because throughout the minor leagues, especially the East Coast leagues, are a lot more pitcher-friendly environments. You go out to the West Coast, you got the PCL, you got the California League, you got the Texas League. Those are much more run-friendly environments. And so it's not apples to apples when you're comparing these guys. Then you have the ballpark effects. We all know Reno's at 5,000 feet or 4,000 feet elevation in the PCL. You got ballparks in Albuquerque, you may as well be on the moon. So it's really important to take all of that into account. So as we go through these, I'm going to be quoting ERA minus and FIP minus. And all you have to remember is lower is better. So, for example, In the case of Chase Petty, he has an 89 ERA minus in AAA, which means he's been roughly 10, 11% better at ERA, but his FIP minus is 109, which means he's been worse than average when it comes to the underlying peripherals, what I was just talking about, where he's not striking out that many and he's walking a few too many. So anyway, that's, as we continue to go through this, I might quote a few more of these.
And just to add real quick on Chase Petty, he does have some major league experience. He's appeared in 3 games this season, 2 starts. They did not go very well, but it's such a small sample size. There's certainly some promise here. He's a top 100 guy, as we mentioned. So who knows? Maybe there's some world where the Diamondbacks come away with Chase Petty in a Geno Suarez trade. Shifting to another team here, Jack, the Yankees are, of course, one of the most trendy teams that we've been hearing about in the Geno Suarez sweepstakes. And the name that keeps coming up there, I'm going to do my best to pronounce this name correctly, is Cam Schlittler. Cam Schlittler is a 6'6", monstrous right-handed pitcher who is actually in the Yankees rotation right now. So this is a guy that you 100%, if somehow you were able to get him, he could just slide right into the Diamondbacks rotation. I don't know if the Yankees would give him up just for Geno Suarez. Maybe they would want a Merrill Kelly or a Zach Gallen thrown in. But this guy, to me, Jack, is very enticing. Would make a lot of sense if the Diamondbacks could pry him away.
Yeah, there's, this past week, there was a lot of noise made over a report that came out from the New York camp. I believe it was the Spanish radio voice kind of leaked out a story. And so Schlittler was a centerpiece return for the Diamondbacks in a multiplayer trade. The interesting thing with him, obviously, he's 24 years old. He's got a big fastball, 97, almost 98 miles an hour on average, can hit 100. And his peripherals are as good or better than his ERA. This year, his 70 ERA minus in AAA and 61 FIP minus means he's 40% better than the league average pitcher in the minor leagues this year. So there's a good reason why he's up in the Yankees rotation right now. So this guy, that certainly fits the definition of a major league ready pitcher. How good he would be coming out here to the NL West, pitching in the desert, who knows, right? We're talking about young players, but this is the kind of return that you definitely need to try to grab if you're trading one or more of your top free agent trade pieces.
Schlittler's fastball, it is worth noting, averages 97.8 miles per hour. That's what it's averaged this season in his 2 big league starts. So definitely an interesting name there, and someone who's been floated around in a lot of rumors as potentially being available for the Yankees. Let's shift gears, Jack, over to the Milwaukee Brewers. There's a few names we could maybe talk about in that organization, but I think the one that stands out to both you and I is right-hander Logan Henderson, who has an ERA under 2 in 4 big league starts this year, and yet because he pitches for the Brewers, he is stuck in AAA.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, he came up, had a really good start, got sent back down. I guess it was just a spot start. Came back up, made 3 excellent starts. He was really good, and now he's back in AAA. It's embarrassment of riches, to have a guy like this. He's a 23-year-old right-hander, throws his average fastballs 93.2. He's got a changeup and a cutter. And he's been, he's got excellent strikeout to walk ratios, despite the fact that he doesn't throw as hard as some of the other guys. That changeup really gets him a lot of swing and miss, and he doesn't walk very many. He's been a little bit homer prone. But here again, I mean, his ERA minus is 74 in the minor leagues and 85 for the FIP minus. So here again, we have a guy that's, between 15 and 25% better than the league average in AAA. And then, of course, he's got a microscopic ERA in his 4 starts in MLB. I think it's 1.7 something. So, if the Brewers are looking for a big bat and they are feeling, a little bit adventurous, then Logan Henderson certainly would be a nice return for the Diamondbacks.
I'm not sure I feel like the Brewers are going to be adventurous in this sort of way. It doesn't really feel like it's in their DNA to trade a really promising young pitcher for a few months of Geno Suarez. It's one of those irrational things that teams who are, very desperate to go all in and go for it would make. And the Brewers have not often taken that approach. So it would be kind of a different sort of move for them. But for what it's worth, Jim Bowden had an article today at The Athletic where he walked through some different potential Geno Suarez trade packages, and he does mention Logan Henderson. There's like a package of a couple of players that he talked about, and then he wrote, if those two for Suarez didn't work, perhaps the Brewers would greenlight a straight-up trade for Logan Henderson, considering their starting pitching depth, and they certainly have no shortage of that.
Yeah, I think the other point to make here is there's a lot of momentum in the industry in pushing the Brewers to go all in. They got the best record in baseball, to capitalize on their current opportunity. So, I don't know if that's how their owner is thinking, but that's what the rest of the industry believes that they should be doing.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, I think so too. I mean, we've seen the Brewers make the playoffs a whole lot, and it feels like once they get there, they just don't have the offensive thump that's really needed to win in the postseason. And if you want some thump, Geno Suarez is probably about as good as you could hope for. Shifting gears, Jack, over to the Seattle Mariners, another trendy team. There's been a lot of rumors along these lines. I know that Mariners fans would probably love to see Geno back with Seattle, even though maybe they're not feeling so great about the trade that happened a couple years ago between these two teams. But the name that stands out to me here, Jack, is Logan Evans, a 24-year-old right-hander who's made 10 starts for the Mariners this season. Another guy who could just slot right into your rotation. And he has pretty good numbers, 3.81 ERA. But I know when we dug a little bit beyond that, you're maybe not quite as impressed as the 3.81 ERA would suggest.
Yeah, I mean the peripherals here aren't that enticing. He's got 6.63 K per nine. That's not striking out very many guys. He gives up a lot of homers, 1.49 walks, home runs per nine. So that adds up to a FIP of 4.88. And he's pitching in Seattle, right? And his home and road splits are pretty bad. He's 2.60 ERA at home and over 5 on the road. What does look good in him and his ERA is very much a product of the ballpark that he's pitching in, I believe. So I don't think that this is really quite the guy that they should be targeting. I think that you get guys out of Seattle that are running up their numbers in that ballpark, you're going to end up with, probably some of that's going to struggle here in the NL West.
To be fair to him, these are the first 10 starts of his career. So I don't think that, this is what Logan Evans is. He's only 24 years old. But you're right. We should be taking those numbers with a grain of salt for sure. And I don't even know if the D-backs get Logan Evans, though, realistically. I know Jeff Passan, when he was on a Seattle radio station yesterday, he floated the idea of Logan Evans, but maybe if the D-backs gave the Mariners both Suarez and Josh Naylor, since the Mariners have issues really at both infield corners. I don't know if the Diamondbacks would be on board with that. And I also, again, I don't know if the Mariners would either. The Mariners certainly have not been in the business of trading their young starting pitching here for the last few seasons. Another pitcher with the Seattle organization is right-hander Ryan Sloan. Another name that stands out to us here that's been mentioned a little bit. He is their number 5 prospect over at MLB Pipeline. He is just 19 years old, but he's also down in just single A, not even high A. So this is a guy who is far away from the big leagues, but I think you could maybe make a case, Jack, that if you're choosing between maybe a big league ready guy, but who doesn't have much of a ceiling versus someone in single A or double A who you maybe could see slotting into the top of a rotation someday, maybe you'd be willing to wait a little bit for a guy that you really feel could be impactful.
Yeah, I mean, I look at his scout grades, 50-55 fastball, 55-60 slider, 50-60 splitter. I want to see, if I'm going to go for an A-ball prospect, I want a guy that's got one of those pitches that's at least a 70. If you're going all the way down to an A-ball prospect, he's got to have at least one really standout pitch. And, the scout grades aren't there for him. So for me, that's a hard pass.
And one last name we'll touch on real quick, shifting gears over to the Chicago Cubs, another team that has been mentioned quite a bit. Jackson Wiggins, Jack, their number 5 prospect over at MLB Pipeline. He is currently in Double A, so this is a guy who's maybe not too far away from the big leagues, but probably not sliding into your rotation immediately. He is 23 years old, and he's put up some pretty promising numbers so far.
Speaking of scout grades, this is a guy that has a 70 fastball grade and also 55 slider. I mean, that's a power pitcher, fastball slider. He sits 96, 97. He can touch 100. His command grades aren't very good, 30, as you might expect with a pitcher like this. But I mean, his ERA and FIP are nearly 50% better than league average where he's at in Double A. So this is a high upside play. This is the kind of guy where, sure, maybe some people might call it a lottery ticket, but for me, I would be very interested in Jackson Wiggins as a guy that, could be in my rotation potentially by mid-season of 2026. I like guys with high ceilings. I mean, for me, that's what I'm really looking for. If I'm going after a prospect like this, I need that ceiling. Jackson Wiggins has it.
Yeah, I think he's a compelling name for sure. You're probably not getting, a team like the Cubs that obviously is very much in the thick of the race. They have one of the best records in all of baseball, and really for all of these teams, they're going to be hesitant to part with those guys who are right on the brink of the majors or already in the majors. So realistically, Jackson Wiggins might be more the type of pitcher that the Diamondbacks are able to get. Would they love a Logan Henderson or someone that they could plug in right away, like a Cam Schlittler? Man, that name is hard to say. If the Diamondbacks make that move, we're in trouble, Jack, because I'm just gonna have to keep saying that name for years and years. But
I guarantee I'll also misspell Jackson Wiggins very, very many times.
yeah,
It's Jaxon.
yes, yeah, we'll have to learn as best we can if and when any of these moves happen. But those are all the names we wanted to go through. We could be here for days, coming up with potential pitchers and other organizations that we think are interesting. But I think it's an interesting exercise, Jack, if nothing else, just to give people an idea of the type of pitcher that the Diamondbacks could realistically acquire. We're not saying that these names are like, it's got to be one of these guys or the Diamondbacks made a big mistake. There are other good, promising young pitchers around the league that we did not talk about, but hearing these names, hearing a little bit about them, hopefully people have an idea of what the D-backs could be looking for here in the next week.
Absolutely, Jesse. And again, just to emphasize what Jesse's saying, we don't know, and neither do the pundits, the other pundits, the other journalists, who the Diamondbacks are really most interested in. I mean, they have their target lists in every major league organization's farm system. We don't have access to that list. We don't know who the Diamondbacks would target, and it may be completely different the way they rate guys compared to Baseball America or MLB Pipeline. In many cases, I'm absolutely sure it is. I've been on the inside of a major league front office and saw some of the snickers of, scout grades and stuff that that were being assigned to certain pitchers. Now, I think they've gotten better since those days. I'm talking 14 years ago. But at that time, I remember listening to, director of player development in the Diamondbacks organization, just pointing at these lists and saying, these scout grades are garbage. They have no sense of reality to them, in their view. Now, who's right, who's wrong, all of that. But the point is that the Diamondbacks have their viewpoint, players that they believe in, players that they're interested in, and it may or may not have anything to do with what you're reading about publicly.
Before we leave the trade deadline topic alone for the day, I do want to dig a little bit deeper on which players we think the Diamondbacks should trade. We've talked about what we think they might do, what the latest news is coming out of Ken Rosenthal and some of the other baseball insiders around the league. But Jack, I guess you kind of referenced it earlier. If it was up to you, you would hold the line with guys like, I guess you're talking about just Merrill Kelly and Geno Suarez in particular, because we feel like those guys have probably the most value out of this group.
Yeah, if the D-backs, especially, if you go off the basis of, okay, the trade deadline opportunity to be big buyers may be passed, but the season is still not over. At the same time, I would be totally, remiss not to say, if they don't add to the bullpen, the season's over. I mean, it just is. This bullpen is not taking them to the postseason or anywhere near it. So, if they're not able to add to the bullpen, then it's kind of pointless. So from that perspective, but I believe that they should hold the line on Gino and Merrill. I think that there's a very good chance to bring Merrill back one way or the other. I did want to mention, I spoke with Merrill Kelly yesterday. I'm going to be writing an article as soon as I get off of here. But there's been a lot of questions about whether or not the D-backs could re-sign Merrill Kelly if he ended up being traded. And Merrill said to me, and I quote, "I wouldn't harbor any hard feelings."
Yeah.
So he would totally understand that if he was traded, it would be an opportunity at this stage of his career to go to a team that has a playoff chance. He made clear, said, "Hey, I think we still have a playoff chance, but if they trade me, certainly I'm going to be going somewhere where they're going to also be in a position to get back to the postseason." He loves Arizona. His wife loves Arizona. He wants to be here. So, if there's anybody that's a candidate to re-sign with a team that trades him, that's Merrill. But at the same time, I think that they should just do what they need to do to keep Merrill here. I think that he wants to be here. I think he's a very solid pitcher. I think that he's able to probably give you at least a couple more good years. So that's my thought there. With Eugenio Suarez, I mean, right now he's, the heart and soul of that clubhouse. I mean, he's the heart of that clubhouse, and he's performing on the field. So, you don't just give him away for an A-ball lottery ticket who's ranked 16 in some teams. You just can't do it. So, like, if the Yankees want to give up Cam Schlittler for, Eugenio Suarez, great, go for it. But don't sell low on him. Hold. For the other guys, I don't know how much they're going to be able to help the team anyway. I think that Zach Gallen is an absolute change of scenery candidate. I don't think he's going to get much better here or much more consistent here. I think that going somewhere else, new voices, new situations, new sight lines could really help him. I think he's just stuck here. He's not going to go anywhere here. Josh Naylor is a solid hitter and a very solid human being and a good clubhouse guy. But unfortunately, his defense really does cut into his value a lot. So if we're talking about total value, I don't think he's all that irreplaceable for the final 2 months of the season.
I think with Zach Gallen in particular, it's interesting to me how, at least from what I've been reading, Jack, from what's been reported here in the last few days, it appears that Zach Gallen's market is at least not hugely different from Merrill Kelly's market. That there is still quite a bit of interest in Gallen in the same way that there's interest in Sandy Alcantara, who's another big name at this year's trade deadline, even though Alcantara is an ERA north of 6. Teams believe that because of the pedigree that these guys have, that if you plug them into the middle of a postseason run, that they're going to be able to turn it on. And it's really interesting to me. And I don't want this to come across as me like, trying to make a case that Zach Gallen has no hope of turning things around. I don't think that at all. But comparing Zach Gallen and Merrill Kelly to me, Jack, I just don't know if I get it, where teams are coming up with this stuff. Why a team would think that Gallen is more desirable than Merrill Kelly. Obviously, there's the numbers this season where there's an enormous difference. But even if you go back to the beginning of 2022, Merrill Kelly has a better ERA plus than Zach Gallen. Merrill Kelly has a 123 ERA plus in that span compared to a 116 for Zach Gallen. Gallen has a better career ERA plus, but the only reason for that is that Gallen was a much better pitcher than Merrill Kelly in 2019 and in 2020. In those first few years that are kind of a distant memory at this point. Over the last 4 seasons, Merrill Kelly has been the better pitcher. And I think the other factor that I've seen referenced a lot is, well, Zach Gallen throws harder than Merrill Kelly. That's not actually really true anymore. Merrill Kelly, in his last outing, he averaged 93.3 with his four-seam fastball. Zach Gallen's season average is 93.3, exactly the same. And Merrill actually set a career high earlier in July when he averaged 94 with his fastball against San Diego. So there's basically no difference in velocity. The surface numbers clearly favor Merrill Kelly. The underlying numbers clearly favor Merrill Kelly. And even if you go back a few years, the numbers still favor Merrill Kelly. So I don't know if I'm missing something here, Jack, or if people just see the fact that Merrill Kelly is 36 years old and they're like, nah, he's kind of at the end of his career. But this just is not making sense to me.
I am sure that other major league offices and coaching staffs they're watching Zach Gallen and they think they know what to do to fix him.
Yeah.
And maybe they do. I mean, that's why I just said I think he's a change of scenery candidate. Clearly, the Diamondbacks don't know what to do to fix him. This problem, I've identified it before. He started getting hit when he came into the zone the second half of 2023 and into that postseason. He was hit pretty hard. He started the nibbling and the lower strike rate in 2024. His walk rate went up. And then this year, the walk rate zoomed. He had some success, the James McCann narrative, helping him get back in the zone, be more aggressive with the fastball. He had a couple of good starts, and then he got hammered twice when he came in the zone. So I don't know why his stuff isn't fooling guys anymore. I don't know what the real issue is as to why he's getting hit so hard when he comes in the zone, but he is.
Yeah.
And so, whether it's a subtle tweak to make him more deceptive, maybe it's something to change the movement profile. There's got to be some kind of change that he's not been able to make and the coaching staff has not been able to help him make. If nothing changes, then nothing will change in the results. So maybe some other team can figure it out.
I guess maybe teams are looking at the fact that Zach Gallen's curveball is genuinely, one of the better out pitches in the game and has been for a while. It has a whiff rate over 40%, and the fastball has a decent amount of ride still, whereas Merrill Kelly, you're not really getting that. So on paper, the stuff metrics with Zach Gallen are a little bit better. It's just that Merrill Kelly has certainly been able to harness his arsenal and get such better results here for a good while now. So anyway, I mean, we're just reading the few stories that are coming out. Who knows? Maybe when all is said and done, Merrill Kelly winds up having an actually, much more robust market than Zach Gallen when all is said and done. We did take a poll on the topic of those two pitchers on our Twitter account yesterday, just asking which of the D-backs starters on expiring contracts should they deal at the deadline. Just Zach Gallen, just Merrill Kelly, both of them, or neither. And these results were interesting to me, Jack. 49.1% said just Zach Gallen. 4.2%, so basically no one, said just Merrill Kelly. 43.5% said both, and then 3.2% said neither. So I guess the takeaway here is that people certainly don't want to see Merrill leave and Zach Gallen stay. And there's actually more people that would rather trade just Zach Gallen than that would trade both of those guys together.
Well, that's certainly understandable because Merrill's been much better and people want to watch good pitching. I mean,
yeah,
pretty straightforward. I ran one other poll myself a couple of days ago on the Diamondbacks on SI site. And it was just, should the Diamondbacks go all in buyer, all in seller, hybrid buy, sell, stand pat?
Sure.
And the hybrid buy, sell, won like over 55% of the vote. And everything else was in the teens. So I think that's kind of what people think the Diamondbacks should do. And that actually kind of, in a way, dovetails a little bit with what Ken Rosenthal was saying. That maybe they still go to that hybrid model and they make them, let's not forget, people have been asking about their outfielders. One last point I want to make is that, I've kind of proposed offline, and I'm not afraid to say it now, that I think that the Diamondbacks should probably be exploring a way to trade Lourdes Gurriel Jr. and get out from under that contract. He's got an opt-out, but otherwise there's one more year that the Diamondbacks have to pay, and then there's an option on a year after that, and with a buyout. So I think if the Diamondbacks can get out from under that contract and you can just plug Randall Grichuk in every day in left field, I don't think there's going to be all that much total value difference between what you would get between those two players.
Yeah.
When Lourdes gets hot, he's better. I mean, there's no doubt about that. He's more than capable of putting up a hot month, but he's got like a 90-something OPS plus. He's been a replacement level player, but there might be a team out there that thinks, well, let's roll the dice a little bit with him because he does get hot for a month at a time, and he can carry an offense for you for 2, 3, 4 weeks. So if the D-backs have an opportunity to move Lourdes Gurriel, I really think they should do that.
Yeah, and Gambo tweeted, I believe it was just yesterday, that there's some teams that are interested in him, which I find a little surprising, Jack, because as you said, he's been a replacement level player. He has an OPS plus of 93. He's never been a terrific defender in left field, and I think this year we've seen that tick down for him. So, yeah, I don't know. I guess it's possible.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, look, he can get hot. You've seen my little graph, his WRC plus by month, and it goes, it goes up and down every month. And, so, hey, he's due for a hot month.
There you go. Well, on a more positive note, it is time for our DraftKings player spotlight. We alluded to it earlier, Jack, but we should probably spend at least a few seconds talking about the fact that Geraldo Perdomo had 7 hits in the 3-game series against the Houston Astros. All 7 came in the final 2 games. He had a 4-hit game and a 3-hit game. It was very, very impressive to see, as he is quite possibly the hottest hitter on the Diamondbacks right now.
It's really amazing. When he got hot to start the season, we've seen him do that before, kind of get off to a hot start and then cool off. And he cooled off a little bit. It's like, okay, in my mind, I was thinking, hey, if he hits over 250 to 270, is around 100 OPS plus, that's a total win from your shortstop if that's where he ends up. And here we are. It's the trade deadline. It's the end of July. And he's got a 126 OPS plus, 283 batting average, 813 OPS, career high, 10 home runs, 72 RBIs. I mean, and he just keeps doing it. I think you mentioned to me before we went on air, his line drive rate is through the roof in July.
Yeah.
It's 24% for the year. What was the number you had?
I think it was 35.4% in July, which is unbelievable and kind of unsustainable, but yeah, impressive nonetheless.
Yeah, well, that's what hot streaks are made of hitting a lot of line drives, and they don't find too many gloves. I mean, that's obviously nobody puts up a 35% line drive rate for a full season. But in the mid 20s, that's what 280, 290, 300 hitters are made out of as well. So, kudos to Geraldo Perdomo. He still doesn't swing the fastest bat or generate the biggest exit velocities, but there's very few players in Major League Baseball that wring the most out of their offensive abilities than Geraldo Perdomo. His plate discipline, his ability to work a count. And there's been a lot of discussion about why isn't he batting at, closer to the top of the order. We've talked about this before. I personally would have him batting second all the time. First or second, leadoff or second, and I would bat Corbin Carroll third and get a little bit more RBI juice out of his home runs. I would not have Perdomo at the bottom of the lineup now. So I don't know why they keep batting him 7th and 9th. And, It doesn't really matter all that much. It's not a huge deal. We all know that batting order at the end of the day doesn't actually make a whole lot of difference, but it makes a little bit. And I do think that Perdomo should be batting in the top 3 in the order.
Before we were having the discussion of, flipping Carroll and Perdomo, because Perdomo was hitting third a lot for a while, and Carroll was hitting leadoff. And so people were asking if we should flip them. And that I think was, we both said, yes, I would have Perdomo hit leadoff, but it's not a huge deal. It's a different conversation when Perdomo's hitting 9th. I mean, this is a player. I'm looking at the Fangraphs WAR leaderboard right now, Jack, and Geraldo Perdomo by Fangraphs WAR has been the 14th best position player in all of Major League Baseball in 2025. He has a 3.7 WAR. The only shortstops ahead of him are Jeremy Pena, Trey Turner, and Bobby Witt Jr. Those are the only shortstops who have been better than Perdomo by that metric in 2025. He's ahead of Elly De La Cruz. He's ahead of Francisco Lindor. I mean, this is a guy who is having a really unbelievable season, and he's done well in that number 9 spot in the past, no doubt. But I think with this version of Perdomo, this new version that we've seen in 2025, I would definitely have him at least somewhere in the top 3 or 4. I don't care too much exactly where it is, but in my mind, you can't have this guy in the 9 spot anymore.
Agree, 100%.
Perdomo continues to have a very, very impressive season. We'll see if it continues down the stretch. And if you haven't bet on baseball before, you can, of course, do so with our friends over at the DraftKings Sportsbook app. If you've never bet on baseball before, it is very easy. Pick a guy to go yard, hammer some live odds mid-game, or just ride with your squad and hope for the best. Jack, we have a suggestion for what people could maybe run with over at the DraftKings Sportsbook app. What do we got?
Well, the Brewers, I mean, they have the best record in baseball, and they have excellent pitching. And we're at the trade deadline, and if they can add to their offense a little bit, there's no reason to think that they can't maintain more or less where they're at. Plus 400, that's a pretty good odds for people that are maybe looking at the Brewers as being a sustainable team as the number 1 seed in the National League. So if you think that the Brewers can maintain this and continue to have the best record in the NL and end up as the number 1 seed, $100 gets you 400 if you're right.
There you go. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code FOUL. That's code FOUL for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings, the crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY at 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas. 21 and over. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio.
Well, Jack, to finish things up here real quick, the Diamondbacks have another very big series coming up this weekend against the Pittsburgh Pirates. I don't know how much it matters even if they sweep the series. I mean, are they aggressive buyers at that point? Probably not. But it still has at least some factor, at least some sway in what the Diamondbacks will do, I'm sure. I don't think they've fully decided exactly what they're going to do. The Diamondbacks, unfortunately, Jack, will get Paul Skeens in the series as he is set to face Zach Gallen on Sunday.
Isn't that like a guaranteed victory? How many games have the Pirates won when Skeens pitches?
Yeah, that's fair. But unfortunately, one of the few he has won came against the Diamondbacks. And I think the Pirates won that game 10-1 or something like that. So the history here isn't great.
D-backs should do.
Yeah, there you go. The Diamondbacks get Skeens this weekend against the Pirates. And then I believe they will get Tarek Skubal in the series after that against the Detroit Tigers. Pretty long road trip here for them, as even after the trade deadline, the road trip will continue in Sacramento as they get a look at what it's like playing in a AAA baseball stadium. Will be interesting to see what happens there.
It really is insane. The Pirates are 10-11 in games started by Paul Skeens, who has a 1.91 ERA and has only allowed 30 runs in his 21 starts. And they're 10-11 in those games, between the offense and then, of course, bullpen, whatever. It's just incredible. That's baseball for you.
It feels like the Pirates are maybe managing Skeens' workload a little bit more here recently. Looking at just his pitch counts from his last few starts, he hasn't hit 90 in quite a while, mostly in the high 70s to high 80s in that range. So you're not necessarily going to see Skeens for 7 or 8 innings if the Diamondbacks are able to work counts, even if he does pitch well and doesn't allow any runs or only allows 1 or whatever it is. You have a chance to get him out of the game after 5 innings maybe, and then maybe you can do some damage against the Pirates bullpen. So we'll see what that looks like this weekend. Well, thank you to all of you for being with us on this episode, as apparently I don't have Jack on the screen, which was my mistake, but we're just going to run with it. We really appreciate you being here. If you haven't already, be sure to like this video, drop a comment, and subscribe to the channel as we continue the road to 1,000 subscribers. We would love to hear from you here on YouTube or over on social media. You can find me at Jesse N. Friedman. You can find Jack at ShoeWizard59. And our show is at Snakes Territory. Jack does a great job covering the D-backs over at si.com/MLB/Diamondbacks. He referenced a Merrill Kelly story earlier in the show that you will definitely want to check out when it drops. So be sure to keep a lookout for that. Thank you again to all of you for being with us. We really appreciate it. And we'll be back again with another episode of Snakes Territory very, very soon.